Good morning and welcome to today's daily devotion as we continue our series in 1 Samuel. Today we're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 8. So it says, when Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second son Abijah, and they were judges over Beersheba. Yet his sons did not follow in his ways. They turned aside, and after gain, they took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways. Appoint for us then a king to govern us, like the other nations." But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to govern us." Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them, just as they have done to me since I brought them out of Egypt this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So also they are doing to you. Now then, listen to their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them, and show them the ways of the king who will reign over them." So Samuel reported all of the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. And he said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands, commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courtiers. He will then take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards and give them to his officers and his courtiers. He will take your male and female slaves and the best of your cattle and donkeys and put them to his work. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." So the people, they had followed Samuel, but he grew old. And so with old, they're like, oh, okay, he's not relevant anymore. He doesn't understand our needs anymore. He's not exactly what we want. But as he grew old, they began to desire a more physical person, a physical representation to rule over them. Since they demanded a human monarch instead of God-appointed one, God directed Samuel to describe the consequences of what their demand would be. For every action, there's a reaction. For every choice that they make, there is always going to be a consequence, whether it's a good one or a bad one. And they would get exactly what they deserved, a Saul instead of a David. Often the Lord disciplined his children by letting them have exactly what they demanded, even when it wasn't the best thing for them. He just allows it to happen. Doesn't necessarily matter if it's going to help them or hurt them. He just allows it because they have free will and they can make their own choices. And this is what they did here. Many have observed that we can choose our choices, but we don't always choose the consequences of our choices. The psalmist said this, "And he gave them their request, but sent leanness to their soul." And this is one of the most heartbreaking stories of the entire Bible, I think. God has done so much for the people of Israel. He delivered them from slavery. He fed them. He sheltered them in the wilderness, brought them to the promised land, cared for them, set judges in their midst to guide them. And in return, they still rejected his favor, and they asked for a human king. And God guided Samuel, who's been faithful to God, to let the people make their own choice, even as that they were warned of the consequences of their choices. And this is also one of the most profound ways that God shows his love and respect and to his people. And God could have refused his request and continued to appoint judges and everybody else to be over them, but he listened to what they wanted and he allowed it to happen. And we make choices every single day, some good, some bad. Like today in the office, I skipped breakfast and I had a brownie. Thank you, Miss Sue, for bringing us brownies. And I had one of those for breakfast. Now that was a bad choice, and it will ultimately lead to me probably having a sugar crash later in the day or being more hungry or gaining a little bit of weight because that was a bad choice. It felt good at the time, but ultimately it's a bad choice down the road. It's the same thing with God. And our ability to choose is one of the most precious gifts that we have in this life. We don't always get to choose what happens around us, but we have the power to choose how we will respond to the things that happen. One of the most difficult things for us to learn is to let others choose for themselves too. For some reason, we tend to believe that loving someone means that we get to choose exactly what we want for their lives, what we think is best for them. We tend to believe that all of that is true. How often have you found yourself telling someone that you know exactly what's best for them, and that they shouldn't do what they want to do? They shouldn't do their own choices or their own path, but they should go the way that you want them to go because you ultimately know better, or you know the things that are going to happen are so much better for them. But sometimes we do. And maybe sometimes we can see a little bit further down the road that they can. But at the end of the day, it's their choice to make, whether they listen to us or they listen to themselves or they listen to God. That's going to be their choice. And they have to endure the consequences. And God does the same thing. God knew that what would happen if the people chose a human king, but he let them do it anyway. But he never let them go. He never stopped guiding them. And God never stopped loving them. As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this little story. A famous pastor told of a time when, as a young boy, he found a big black cigar. He slipped into an alley and he lit it up. It didn't taste good, but it made him feel very grown up until, that is, he saw his father coming down the alley. Quickly, he put the cigar behind his back and tried to be casual. Desperate to divert his dad's attention, he pointed to a billboard advertising a circus. "Can I go, Dad? Please, let's go when it comes to town." The father's reply taught him a lesson he never forgot. "Son," he answered quietly but firmly, "never make a petition while at the same time trying to hide a smoldering disobedience." So never try to ask for something while you're hiding something else. When you've asked for the bad thing, or when you're doing the bad thing, never ask for a good thing. It's going to completely blindside every decision, and it'll mask the person that's maybe giving you an option or is giving you a different way to do something. It'll always change the outcome of the situation. So be honest, be upright, and be truthful with exactly what you want, and pray about your decisions. Pray that God will give you guidance and clarity for everything that you ask. I want to say thank you for joining us for today's daily devotion. Have a good weekend. God bless you.